Reggie Aloysius Miller on loan from TNT, joining us on the program. What does that do during a game when you see it, Reg, where guys just go back and forth in each other's faces?
Personally, I can only speak for myself, Theodore.
Yep.
It helped me. And the reason why it helped me, because there's times during a game where, or even entering a game, and potentially you're not at your best, or you're not playing at the highest level. Sometimes if you can get into a verbal, I wouldn't say altercation, but if you could mentally challenge yourself by somewhat going at your opposition, a lot of times I used to just talk just to get myself going. It was nothing personal against whoever I was playing. It was never personal versus John Starks or Michael or Dwyane Wades, guys that I had, verbal altercations with, but it was to get myself going. And you're absolutely right. When I was watching that football game yesterday, I think number one, it looked like both of those teams didn't like one another. And I think we'll see very much the same thing coming up between San Francisco and Seattle next week. Yeah. But it's teams that don't like one another. But a lot of times it's to get yourself going. And that's what I used to do a lot.
But it seems like that game, it was just every play mattered, and it was physical. Anquan Bolden, and he's a veteran. Now, I know that that's part of his game. It just felt like that he was trying to get in the heads of those defensive backs with Carolina. I don't know if he succeeded doing it, but I thought there was too much of it, and it sort of lessened the degree of intensity there when these guys were jawing after every single play.
Well, are you surprised that a wide receiver would be talking? Come on now. That's when you think of probably the most loquacious guys on a team, that would be that wide receiver position. So I'm not surprised, and I'm sure we'll see a lot of that from Richard Sherman next week from the defensive end for Seattle.
Did anybody get into your head doing that?
I'm going to tell you who was good, and I mentioned his name, in Dwyane Wades. And what made him so good is the way his dialect was, being Croatian. I believe he was Croatian. Yugoslavian, if I'm going to be politically correct here, and the broken English, and he was such a fantastic player, and maybe, in my opinion, the best shooter I've ever seen, ever seen. And for him to come back at me in broken English and me not understand him, it used to drive me absolutely crazy, Dan. Because I couldn't understand. I kind of wanted to go back at him in his native tongue, and I couldn't. And he was saying the same things I was saying to him, and it just drove me crazy, my friend.
Dwyane Petrovic died in a car accident. I got a chance to see him play when he was with the Nets. I think he was 28 when he died. And he was a very, very, very good player. Very good shooter.
In terms of using screens, coming off screens, and shooting absolutely in your grill. You could be all over him, and I don't know. He had one of the quickest releases, and he used to shoot the basketball so quick coming off screens. You could close out. You could be all over him, and it wasn't like he was shooting 15, 17-footers. He was taking this to the three-point line. He was one of the toughest covers I've ever had.
He shot 45% from three-point range, I think.
Unbelievable. A great, great shooter.
He's Reggie Miller joining us, Dan Patrick Show. The Heat lose to the Knicks and then the Nets. How does that happen?
Looking at their watches, wondering when is the playoffs getting ready to start. Right now, winning back-to-back championships, and I've said this, I don't think home court advantage is that important this year for the Heat. Now, obviously, if you go back to last year, they win Game 7 versus the Pacers at home. They win Game 7 versus the Spurs at home. They needed that. I think winning back-to-back championships, they recognize, look, we can go into anyone's building and win one game. So I don't think they're really concerned about having that home court advantage versus Indiana. What they do want to be doing is playing well. If you remember around this time last year, they went on that 25-game winning streak the start of the new year. Took that all the way to the end of March. And they played well and kind of catapulted that to their second championship. I think if you're Coach Eric Spoelstra, that's what you want to see from the Heat going forward. He wants them to get on a 7-8 game winning streak, maybe lose one, get back to winning 8 or 9 in a row, just to kind of get that, get a little bit of that ball rolling of playing well come playoff time.
I also look at Dwyane Wade, and there are times when you don't know it's a game time decision or he's not going to play back-to-back games. And I know you pace yourself. We've learned that from Greg Popovich, who I think is the master at that. He doesn't care about home court advantage or have the best record. It's just my guys will be rested come playoff time. But if we talked about this before, you look at big picture. Why Dwyane Wade's health will have what impact on LeBron James staying in Miami?
He has to continually be the second best player on the floor behind LeBron. And if that's sitting him in back-to-back games, if you're Pat Riley, Spoelstra, the Heat, you have to do it. Because if you look at the playoffs last year, when the Heat struggled, it's when Dwyane Wade struggled. When the Heat were untouchable, he was playing at a high he was Robin to the Batman. Mm-hmm. And he has to play at that level on a consistent basis. So if that's sitting out back-to-backs and he only plays 2 games, if they have a 4 and 5 game night week, then he has to sit out. Because when he is playing at an all-time level, that makes LeBron James obviously a cushion to be the best player in the world. But I recognize and understand there's a lot of wear and tear on Dwyane. I would definitely not play him in back-to-backs because you're going to need him April, May, and June.
I saw where Kevin Love called out a couple of his teammates, not by name.
I loved it.
But Kevin Love is going to start to get the pressure of you're a marquee player, maybe one of the top 5, certainly one of the top 10 players. You have to start making the playoffs. I think Love is starting to feel that pressure a little bit here. I don't think his future is in Minnesota. I still think he'll end up, in Los Angeles. But
Lakers.
He's 25. And I've said all along, in the last 2 years, it just feels like he'll end up with the Lakers there. How does this play out in Minnesota with K-Love?
Well, certainly he's going to have to start making the playoffs because when we start talking about best power forwards in the game, it starts with LaMarcus Aldridge. Obviously, it probably drops to Blake. I personally like Kevin Love to be my second power forward. But the difference between Kevin Love and those other 2 guys I've mentioned is they've competed in playoffs, and they've played at the highest level. And Kevin Love has yet to do that. And granted, he doesn't have the supporting cast of a Chris Paul or a Damian Lillard, but Rubio's not too bad. But it's the Kevin Love show in Minneapolis. Especially, think of the pressure here. He's following a Hall of Famer in Kevin Garnett, who, even though he wasn't hugely successful in the playoffs in Minnesota, but they got to the playoffs. They may have lost in the first round. I think only one time while Kevin Garnett was with the Timberwolves, they got to the Western Conference Finals and lost to the Lakers one year. But you've got to make the playoffs if you're Kevin Love. And your game, he's averaging 25 points, 13 rebounds. He's second in both, or in the top 3 in those 2 categories. I believe only 2 players over the last, 15, 20 years have done that, Charles and Shaq. You've got to make the playoffs.
Mate, but you would take LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin?
I would take LaMarcus Aldridge as my best power forward. Then I would take Kevin Love. Then I would take Blake Griffin.
And I give Blake Griffin credit, not that he's asking for it, but he has improved. He's improved his free throw shooting. I need to have that 15, 18. If he should model himself after Karl Malone.
Absolutely. I've been saying that for the last 3-4 years. If he, number one, he's got to get a better back to the basket game. He just tries bully ball down there. And this is no knock on Blake. And I think he'll be the first to tell you that he needs to be a little bit more creative with his back to the basket. But also, if he really developed that 15 to 18-foot drop-dead face-you jump shot, because he is so quick, no other power forward would be able to handle him. And another thing, come playoff time, I'm not quite sure. I still 100% trust Blake Griffin with the game on the line, him getting fouled, going to the free throw line. Karl improved vastly as a free throw shooter from his rookie year until he retired.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure I'm sold on Blake Griffin. I love his athleticism. I love him dunking on the Mozgovs and the Humphreys and the Kendrick Perkins. Those are fantastic plays. But I agree with Doc Rivers. Those are only 2- and 3-point plays at the best. I want him to develop his game. LaMarcus Aldridge, defined offensive game. Kevin Love, defined offensive game. Blake Griffin, work in progress.
The Alex Rodriguez story and the lengths that athletes will go to try to cheat to become better. If it's Lance Armstrong, whoever you want to throw in there.
Yeah.
Why is the NBA not under that same scrutiny where we look at guys and say, why wouldn't they, with back-to-back games, getting bigger, stronger, more physical, faster? Why would the NBA be, a league that we don't put a closer look to, but we are these other sports?
Well, I'm sure it's being monitored in the NBA. I just don't think PEDs obviously at any rank in basketball because of the athleticism. I think what PEDs do, obviously they bulk you up and they do help you recover, and we do play a lot of games.
Well, they got HGH.
But it does not help you. It does not help your athleticism, where in the game of basketball, as you know, that is so much to be athletic, to run like a deer, to jump like a gazelle, and to be able to really cardio. I don't think PEDs helps you that much.
Do you think you played against somebody who used performance-enhancing drugs?
I'm sure. I mean, law of averages, but I couldn't look at someone and say, there was suspicions that Karl Malone, have you ever seen him work out? He was a workout fanatic.
But you work out because you're using performance-enhancing drugs. It allows you to, not that saying Malone did, I'm saying it allows you to work out. I know you played against one guy. I know.
Are you going to name him? Who?
No, I won't name him. I'll name him to. I'll text you just to be fair. But you,
I will. Here's the question I tell people: if there was a PED, if there was a pill that allowed me to jump like Michael Jordan, to be able to palm the basketball and be as athletic as Michael Jordan, would I have taken it? That is such a tough question, Dan, because we're talking about the best player ever in my era, and probably in any era, in Michael Jordan. Would I have done that? I seriously may have thought about that to be able to compete at that level.
But if I said you could jump, here's a pill. You're going to be able to jump as well as anybody in the game. Would you take it? And nobody's going to know that you've taken it.
And it's illegal?
Yes.
Probably not. Just because I probably wouldn't have, because I think it always starts from how I was raised, to do it the right way.
How angry would your dad be?
Oh, my God.
If you did it and he found out?
Oh, my God. Chief Master Sergeant, Dad Miller. I don't know if I could go home. I don't know if I could go home to the Chief Master Sergeant.
Did he ever treat you, though, like you were in the military?
Oh, come on. We were raised that way. We're talking about waking up at 6:30, making your own bed military style. So there's a difference from making your bed, what some of these kids do, and military style. We're talking about tucking the corners, popping the penny on it, making sure that the penny bounces on the sheets. Yeah, we were raised that way, Theodore. But you know what? I wouldn't change it for anything, because it's made me the foundation of the man I am. Structure, I'm a little bit anal in terms of preparation, but that all comes from my military background and being a Virgo as well. But I wouldn't change it at all. I think what we're so frustrated with the PEDs and A-Rod is probably the line, because he stopped lying about it. Just admit it and move on. But Major League Baseball has just as much, I would say, egg on their face than anyone, because they knew all this was going on. I'm so tired of all of this.
Yeah.
Because Major League Baseball is a little bit of hypocrites, because they knew this was going on way back when. They really did.
Have fun in Indy on Thursday night. Always great to talk to you, buddy.
It's always good to go back home to Indiana. Knicks at Pacers. It should be a fantastic. Carmelo Anthony versus Paul George is going to be a great matchup, Theodore.
Thank you, buddy.
Appreciate it. Danettes, I love y'all.
Reggie Aloysius Miller, Knicks, Pacers, TNT coming up Thursday night.